Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're still well caffeinated and we're still aspiring to be viral. And now we're a proudly sponsored weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and a fan base kind of eager to show the SEC maybe Irish football just means more. I'm Eric Hansen in South Bend and still stuck in my TV clothes. He's Tyler James loading up the tomatoes to throw at his TV when I come on the air. Together, we are the content creators and word salad avoiders at blueandgold.com, our new home. On tonight's show, well, Marcus Freeman had a press conference today, and we're going to decode that for you a little bit. Is it coach speak? Is it confidence? We'll also give you some bounce back players possibly to look at. Bounce around some recruiting topics, and of course, your questions, compliments, and quips to start filling up that question portal. This is Football Never Sleeps.
All right. As Eric mentioned, Football Never Sleeps is now presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find everything you need, from grills to jerseys and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Under Armour, all at unbeatable prices every day. With 8 Academy stores across Indiana and a new store coming soon to Mishawaka, fun can't lose and neither can you. Gear up today at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Welcome, everyone, back from a Notre Dame game week, from a bye week. We appreciate everyone joining us live and interacting with us tonight. I hope you enjoyed the weekend, and thank you to those who are watching us on replay as well. Please hit the like button and make sure you subscribe to our channel. The Hansen and James channel is trending toward 5,000 subscribers, and that's all thanks to everyone who watches us, comments, and shares our content. We really appreciate that. And before we get into today's topics, I have a special deal for new subscribers who want to sign up to blueandgold.com. We're now offering $1 per week for an entire year, so you can purchase an annual subscription to Blue and Gold for just $52, which is more than half off the regular price. You can head to blueandgold.com, hit the Join Now button at the top of the page, and take advantage of this awesome deal. I've also included a link to the subscription page in the video description down below as well.
That's a great deal. And thank you for doing the math.
And well, let's get started with our opening drive with Marcus Freeman meeting the media today. Today was the first time since his post-game press conference following the season opening loss to Miami that Notre Dame head coach Marcus Freeman met with reporters. He took questions on the team ahead of Saturday's matchup with number 16 Texas A&M. Eric, what were your biggest takeaways from Freeman's press conference today?
I'm not sure that I perceived him as down as some other people did. I thought that he was a guy that felt like he came up with some answers during the bye week and wasn't going to enumerate all those with us. But I felt like he wasn't a guy kind of spinning his wheels and throwing the word salads out. I felt like I got some answers about, especially on the defense and maybe to a lesser extent of the offensive line. But the questions that I wanted to have answered, I thought were answered. The other really good takeaway for me was somebody asked about CJ Carr and would we see a more opened up offense? And Marcus Freeman says, we have to keep him from wanting to chuck it down the field every throw. So I thought that was amusing, and I think it'd be encouraging for Notre Dame fans to know that that's CJ's mentality. How about you? What were your takeaways?
Yeah, I was interested in, and we'll talk about a little bit more later about the confidence he expressed in the offensive line. I know that was a big question coming out of the season opener in terms of their performance. I think the way he talked about how Notre Dame attacked practice last week in a bye week, I think was a good sign to me. I mean, not necessarily surprising, but good to confirm that, and sort of the focus on clarity in terms of sort of cleaning things up and getting guys to play at a higher level. I thought those were all interesting things that Marcus Freeman had to say. Defensive improvement priorities were, according to Marcus Freeman, included takeaways, tackling, and third downs. Those were some of the things Notre Dame was trying to focus on coming out of the first game. How much of that do you think can get corrected between game 1 and game 2?
I think we will see incremental improvement. I mean, I don't think this is about bringing a wand to practice and having it be an event. I think it's about incremental improvement. And in a column I did on what Chris Ash's reboot, or I don't know if reboot or kickstart's probably a better word, to his defensive evolution would look like, I went back and looked at Marcus Freeman's 2021 season, which I asked him about in the press conference. They were in worse shape statistically after their opener in 2021 against a Florida State team that ended up being 80th in the country in total offense. And some of the things that you mentioned, lack of turnovers, third down problems. By the end of the year, Notre Dame was 10th in third down defense, which was the highest of the Brian Kelly era. So again, I think you'll get there. Marcus Freeman talked about it being a yearly process for him, and not an annual process, but throughout the season process for him in 2021, his 1 year as defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. What's your take on that, Tyler, after I gave you a big, long time to think about it?
Yeah, I think almost statistically it's been proven that takeaways can be somewhat random, but I think the effort to create them isn't random. Like you can do all you want in terms of trying to create them, and sometimes they're just not going to happen, or you can have bad luck. You knock the football out and it bounces right back to them or something like that. But you can make sure it's an emphasis in terms of doing that. And I think having the bye week to do that should be helpful. I think tackling remains a focus. That's tough because of the sort of constraints you have in terms of not wanting to be too physical in practice and truly playing full go in a practice setting that you would on a game. I do think like it's easier to tackle when you're not getting physically dominated in other aspects. And I think that was some of the problem with Notre Dame against Miami. And then third downs, I think, yeah, I mean, those can be executed better. They can be called better. I think there's ways that can improve. And I think you can see pretty big spikes in that. And we'll get into it later, but Texas A&M is not very good on third down, or at least hasn't been through its first two games so far this season.
Yeah,
So
that was surprising. As good as their offense is, how much they've struggled on third down. Ed, thank you for the plug. I hope that's not a rhetorical question. It's an actual question. But when you were talking about takeaways, you know, with Al Golden's regime, it was game 4 before they got their first takeaway. And we associate pressure with creating takeaways too. Notre Dame only had 2 tackles for loss that in the game. One of them was a sack, and then a quarterback hurry. The last time Notre Dame had fewer than 2 tackles for loss was a season when Brian Van Gorder started the year as their defensive coordinator. That was 2016. He did not finish the year. So it's been a long time since there's been that little pressure generated in a game.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been surprising in terms of, or at least was surprising in terms of how the defense have both played and seemingly was called to play or was asked to play. Marcus Freeman seemed to suggest that the defensive play was more about execution than scheme. Do you buy that?
I think it's both. And I think when I came around toward the end and asked him about his own experience that way it was on Marcus and not on Chris Ash, I think he was a little bit more open about the fact that, you know, when he came in, he was a hot defensive coordinator. And then they get into the Florida State game, and those things that could have been exposed in training camp didn't get exposed, but Florida State exposed them. And he had to play defense differently. He had a vision for a scheme, but it didn't completely fit the players he had at Notre Dame. And so he had to adjust it. So I think when he circled back around to that question, I think he admitted it was both. It was execution, which he said is on the coaches to get the guys to play, understand, fly around. But I also think there's some schematic things that needed to be fixed during the bye week. How about you? What were you thinking of when he said that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some validity to it. Like missed tackles, like I don't think those are a product of the coaching staff. getting knocked off the ball, getting outrun in coverage. Like those to me aren't scheme issues. Now you could say, well, maybe those guys shouldn't have been in those positions, or they should have played different kinds of coverages. But those are more execution issues. So I think there were certainly times where Notre Dame maybe could have played more aggressively, and maybe that backfired against Notre Dame. But I do think the play within the players rather than the play calls wasn't always aggressive too. And maybe there's a mimicking of that. If they feel like the coach isn't being aggressive, then maybe they're not playing aggressive too.
Well, let's break that down a little bit more. Let's take a guy like Drake Bowen. Drake ends up with 8 tackles, but he has 4 missed tackles. And our Jack Sobel mentioned as we were walking back to our cars, he had 5 all of last year. He had 4 in this game. So what could be causing that? I mean, Marcus Freeman talked about having gap discipline with this scheme. And if there wasn't good gap discipline, the linebackers can't flow. And maybe that, Drake Bowen thinking, okay, I'm going to flow here, make the tackle. And then all of a sudden he's messing with a guard. I mean, maybe that threw him off his game a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how he responds. But to me, that's one thing. I think these things are all interwoven together. It's not just one thing right here. They all kind of connect.
Yeah, I don't have like his missed tackles committed to memory, so I don't know what maybe physical.
Why not
on the field may have impacted those instances, but certainly if you're thinking too much and your head's not in the right spot, like you could be in the right place and just not also be physically ready to make the play, and that could be an issue. So I think there's I think there's higher expectations for his play. Probably from everyone involved, including Drake himself, because I think he's better than the performance he had against Miami.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to 2021, Marcus Freeman, they gave up 38 points to Florida State in that opener. Then they played Toledo the next week, and it was a 32-29 game, and Notre Dame was really lucky to win that. And again, by the end of the season, that was a pretty good defense. And without Kyle Hamilton in it, they lost him at midseason. So there at least is a precedent, and there's a guy that's the head coach that knows what that's supposed to look like. So I'm at least open-minded about the possibility for improvement this week against a really good offense. Other than third downs, I think Texas A&M is pretty solid with their offense.
Yeah, and Drake Bowen is a captain, and I think it's fair to say that a number of Notre Dame's captains didn't play their best against Miami. I asked Freeman about how the captains on the O-line specifically have handled that, and he broadened it to talking about all of the captains after talking a little bit about Billy Schrouth and Emil Wagner. He mentioned that he doesn't want the title of captain to be associated with production. He wants it to be tied to leadership and influence. It's easy to keep those things separated from my perspective after one game, but how long do you think that can last if a captain isn't producing?
If they're expected to produce, I think it's difficult. I think the thing that gets people to follow you beyond your words is your actions. And if they see you struggling, or if they saw you loafing, which isn't going to happen with these captains, but if they saw you struggling, I do think it affects how people perceive you. If you're playing with confidence, for example, if Drake Bowen comes back with a monster game, I think that's going to inspire other people. I think that's going to help the people around him, because that's one thing you do as a captain. You make the players around you better.
Yeah, I agree. I think certainly you can be a captain who doesn't play a lot and be a tremendous leader. But if you're someone who's playing a lot and you're making mistakes and you're a captain, it's harder to fall in line. If you're a guy that's supposed to listen to that guy, you feel like, hey, you need to work on yourself. Like, you don't need to worry about me right now. So I think that could be a concern if too many of those captains keep struggling this season. That's not necessarily what I expect, but I think it is something worth monitoring. Lastly, before we get into some questions, is there a downside from your perspective to Notre Dame's off week being last week?
The only downside I see is you don't have that chip to play later. Like if you needed something in November, you're not going to have it. But I think all in all, this ended up being a benevolent timing for Notre Dame. I think it was smart to have it between what could be their 2 toughest games on their schedule. And and I think this gives them more time to adjust. Had they had a Sunday night game on the road and then had to play Texas A&M this week, I mean, it wouldn't have worked out that way. They would have put one of the other opponents there. But let's say they had Texas A&M. I think that was a recipe for disaster. And even if it was somebody like NC State that's kind of middle of the pack kind of team, I think that would have also been a real challenge given what happened at Miami, being drained from the humidity and so forth, and having a short runway for this week.
Yeah, I think the only potential downsides that I can see is that maybe there's the frustration from the opener gets too pent up after having to wait too long to get back out there on the game field. I imagine some of their teammates felt that out on the practice field last week. But I think it's a good opportunity to get better. I mean, maybe A&M feels more dialed in on Notre Dame because they only had to study one game. But also that could be limiting too, and that there's only one game worth of film on a lot of these players at
with
Notre
a
Dame.
really different quarterback than theirs.
So I think all told, I think it ended up working out pretty well for Notre Dame. But I think if Notre Dame loses, then maybe you don't feel that way. I think Notre Dame needs to capitalize and win a big game at home to get back on track. When we were talking about the captains, Tom Farley was chiming in. Eric Ned Bolkar played behind Snowbreaker a lot. Bolkar was a two-time captain and he split time at linebacker.
Right, but that doesn't mean Bolkar didn't play well. And we actually had Bolkar on our pregame show on Sunday, and it was really a pleasure to catch up with him. It had been a while since I had had a chance to talk to him. So thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, I don't say you need to be a starter. I think you need to play well. I think that your performance matters.
All right, I will get into a few of these questions, and I want to do a quick segment that I dubbed "Coach Speak" or Confidence, and we'll dissect a little bit more about what Marcus Freeman had to say today. EJ Ricky says, "Hey guys, Texas A&M opened against UTSA and Utah State. Is it difficult to go against these teams and then have to take on a bigger and faster team in ND?"
I think, EJ, that where it's difficult is Texas A&M took a really different tack in terms of how they were going to go through their preseason practice. They went almost no contact. I mean, not even like it was more flag football than it was tackle. Now, again, not a lot of people are slamming people to the ground in August, but Texas A&M, I think, had one scrimmage. A lot of their best players sat out that scrimmage. So they were extra cautious with injuries, hoping it would pay off. To me, the question is, did these two games, UTSA and Utah State, provide them with the physicality they need and the speed that they need to see to be adjusted to Notre Dame? Notre Dame has seen speed and physicality in their one game. So to me, that's going to be an interesting storyline on Saturday night. And Tyler is giving his commentary in silent count, so you have to read his lips.
Yeah, so tell me what I said there, Eric. No, I'm kidding. Sorry about
Tyler
that.
said, I agree with everything Eric said because he's so wise.
Yeah, you're so wise. Cover the team back to the Rockety days, as was a joke that was made earlier today. I think UTSA has some good athletes, so I think there's probably some speed that UTSA had. Certainly, like top to bottom roster wise, like the UTSA's roster doesn't necessarily compare to Notre Dame's. I think the physicality is probably the bigger thing, and obviously the combination of physicality and speed is something that it's hard to account for when you're seeing it on film versus actually going against it on the playing field. And EJ also chimed in saying Tyler White, A&M's punter, is his cousin, so let him know it's good for everyone involved if he gets to play a lot. I thought that was
that's awesome.
that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Jeff Stevens said Marcus Freeman suggested that the right guard spot will not be shared this week. So who do you think will play and why?
Well, he didn't say it necessarily would be. That was the question I asked him. I think Gerby will play. I think he'll be the starter. I think he showed them enough. And again, he was right. Each of them had their deficits. I thought Gerby played better than Sullivan Absher in that game. And I think just the fact that he was the choice to start in that game and nothing changed with Absher where you said, oh my gosh, that was a mistake. He should have been the starter. So for me, I think it's Gerby, but he is not committed to a timeshare. They certainly could do it. I don't expect it, Jeff. I do expect one or the other to be, and I think it's going to be Gerby Lambert.
Yeah, I believe so as well. I thought Lambert played better of the two. I think Absher did all right when he was in there. There wasn't enough of like, okay, Absher's doing this that Lambert isn't doing. That made me feel strongly about him sort of unseating a Gerby Lambert. And maybe there will still be a rotation, and maybe it'll be based off of, you know what, Gerby Lambert's had a couple of rough series in a row. Let's throw a Sullivan Absher out there because we have a lot of confidence in him. Maybe that's something they do with a younger player there in Gerby Lambert, but I do think he will be the starting right guard and would expect him to play the majority of the time. Scott Fegan says, can Love get the ball at least 10 to 15 times in the first half? I'm curious how the O-line will come out to start the game if they can play to their potential and he will score more than last week.
It depends on how much Notre Dame has the ball. I will say this. Texas A&M's run defense has been really bad the first 2 weeks. I mean, they're in the 80s in terms of run defense. And you think about the two teams they faced, neither of them are like a service academy or anything. And I think UTSA is pretty below average as far as a running team. And it's not like you could say, well, did they take their foot off the gas? Well, usually when you're trying to play catch up, you're throwing the ball. You're not running it, trying to get up your rushing yardage. So I think there is a real opportunity for not only Jeremiah Love, but Jadarian Price and the rest of the rushing attack to take advantage of what was not a weakness with Texas A&M last year, which appears to be at least through week 2 a weakness with this team.
Yeah, that number might be a little bit high, but I do think that getting the ball to Jeremiah Love will be a focus in the first half. And I think, especially if there's some success with it, I think they'll keep going to it too, right? Like that was part of my frustration with the play calling was that I didn't feel like the running backs were given enough opportunities to sort of fail. Like they were sort of maybe not playing extremely well until that one drive where Jadarian Price ripped off a couple of nice runs. But it just felt like they were too sparingly given opportunities to sort of get some momentum going. And I think the offense that goes for the offensive line as well. Scott also asked, do you see a Notre Dame team more focused that will play with violence on Saturday night?
I think they're going to be fired up. Being at home in front of the home crowd, Texas A&M is a team that doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy. Yeah, I think they'll be fired up.
Yeah, I would think so. I'm not sure that I would say focus was something that I felt like Notre Dame lacked against Miami. It felt more physical than mental to me. That it wasn't that Notre Dame wasn't focused. It was that they weren't sort of bringing it in at the same level of intensity. So yes, they need to play with maybe more violence, but I'm not sure that Notre Dame lacked focus against Miami. Jeff Stevens says, I think the lack of snaps for Bryce Young was confusing. Are we sure he's 100%?
I thought he was in the 30s with his snaps. I'd have to look that up, Tyler, when you start talking. So I do think
you are.
Okay, so I do think he was 100%. I think there were a couple things that tripped people up in that game. One is he didn't show up impactful as we thought he would. I think the other thing is, and I was talking to somebody that follows Notre Dame pretty closely. They didn't realize he had switched numbers. They were looking for number 30 out there. He's 95 now. And so they didn't see 30 and they thought, wow, I guess he didn't play. So I don't know, Jeff, if he just wasn't as impactful for you. I know you're probably on top of it. And
he did say that he knew the number. I know he's followed up with that once after he submitted the question.
Okay. So, but what was the snap count for him? I mean,
Bryce
he played more than Burnham, right?
Yes, he played 32 defensive snaps. Burnham played
70.
Burnham played 25. Yeah, out of 71, Leonard Moore had.
Okay.
Boubacar Traore, the other defensive end, played 46, so there was a difference of 14 between the two. Even though I think Bryce Young has upside as a pass rusher, I still think Traore's better right now. So that probably was the biggest difference in that. I mean, in terms of pass rush snaps, Bryce Young only played 13. That was the bigger surprise to me, that they weren't trying to get him on the field in more of those situations. But I did think that he didn't play as well as I expected him to.
Right.
The snaps wasn't as surprising to me. Aaron Ranson said, "Do you think Notre Dame will get back to what works on defense with predominantly man coverage? Will we see better linebacker play and pressure on their quarterback?"
Okay, let's unpack that one at a time. Let's go with the zone or man coverage. Yeah, I would expect them to move back toward man a little bit. I think it's good to have it in your pocket. I'm not sure that Carson Beck was the greatest person to put that on, given his experience with zone. He seemed like he picked it apart. I also felt like it minimized who Leonard Moore is. And I think I'd like to see more man-to-man defense. So if I had a vote in the meeting room, that's the way that I would push it. Not exclusively man, but for a team that played more man defense than any team in college football last year, had the number one pass efficiency defense, and has a lot of the same pieces, that would be my thinking, especially this week with those two really good receivers that A&M has, Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver. Both of those guys transfers.
Yeah, I think you got to mix it up. I would be curious, like, is Marcel Reed willing to be as patient seemingly as Carson Beck was, and not patient in terms of like being decisive, because I think Carson Beck was decisive, but I think he was patient in terms of like, hey, I'll take a 5-yard free easy pass and not worry about trying to force the issue down the field. He did a couple of times in big situations to get 20-yard touchdown receptions, but I think he was willing to take the underneath stuff. And if Marcel Reed is willing to do that, I think Notre Dame cannot sit in a zone. It has to be more aggressive with its man coverage and force Marcel Reed into tougher throws.
The second part of that is, will we see better linebacker play and pressure on their quarterback? I would think so on both counts, but I will say this: Texas A&M's offensive line is supposedly as good, if not better, than Miami's. At least coming into the season, they were. They also have a preseason All-American on their offensive line. They're very experienced, and Marcel Reed can move around better than Carson Beck. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Notre Dame does schematically, both to try to pressure him and also to make sure that he doesn't get outside the pocket and gash them in the run game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think we'll see a better linebacker play. I think Notre Dame has good linebackers. They just maybe didn't play as well, although I think they were among the higher graded PFF players on the scale of how Notre Dame played defensively. But I do think the linebacker play will be improved against A&M, and I think you nailed it in terms of like the dilemma in terms of trying to pressure Marcel Reed versus keep him contained as well. Ed Straub says, "Do you think this A&M team is a lot better than the A&M team last year?"
A lot better? No. In certain parts, yes. I think they definitely upgraded at quarterback, with Marcel Reed being better than Connor Wegman at the beginning of the year,
right,
and better than the version of what they had last year. I think he's better. I think they went out and got speed at receiver. They had big kind of lumbering receivers last year that couldn't get separation. They have guys that can separate now. It'll be interesting to see how Notre Dame plays them. I think where they are not as good is in their front four. I know that there was a guy for A&M that got 3 sacks on 3 consecutive plays, but I think their defensive line is a problem for them that needs to get solved for them over the season. So I think right now, given the pluses and the minuses, I think they're pretty comparable to what they were last year.
Yeah, I don't know how you could say that they're a lot better. I mean, maybe they'll end up being a lot better, but it's too early to say that based off of the performances so far. I do think there is some talent on the edge in terms of Texas A&M's defense and with pass rush. Obviously, the run defense is a concern in terms of their defensive line. So I think that is a weakness for A&M more than it was last season. But yeah, the quarterback situation seems to be in a better place. I think they probably have better wide receivers to help Marcel Reed than they did last season. I think the defense doesn't have like the big names up front, but maybe in the back seven has some pretty decent talent as well.
Also, the interesting thing about their offense is they've really restrained how they've used Le'Veon Moss. Not the way Jeremiah Love is, where everybody's going, what's going on? I mean, Moss had an injury that knocked him out, I think, the last 4 games last year, a leg injury. They brought him back very slowly. He was one of the people that sat out of the scrimmage. They got very little contact, and then played very little in the Texas San Antonio game. I think he had 10 carries against Utah State. So he may get more usage. It'll be interesting to see if he does against Notre Dame.
So, Eric, as we left Notre Dame Stadium today after Marcus Freeman's press conference, there were some things that had me wondering if it was coach speak or if it was how he truly felt, which probably you could say about most press conferences, but I felt like this one in particular, there were a few things that stood out to me. So I'm going to have you parse whether you think the answer was coach speak and covered up some of his concerns, or if he's genuinely confident in what he said. So first,
do I get to just do this by myself, or are you going to veto me after each answer?
Oh, I won't veto you. I'll share my opinion, but I won't say you're wrong.
Okay,
but
okay, cool.
I might disagree. So first, Marcus Freeman said of Notre Dame's offensive line, I thought overall they played well. The standard is to play higher. We know that. He later said, I'm as confident in that group as anybody in our team. They'll be fine. Do you think that was coach speak or confidence?
The last line, I believe. The rest of it, I think, was coach speak. So all in all, coach speak. I do think he's confident that they'll play better, but the part about them playing well, I wasn't buying on that. How about you?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I do think he has confidence in this offensive line despite their performance against Miami. I do think he maybe wasn't as critical as the offensive line as it would have been fair to have been. All right, he also suggested Notre Dame didn't use multiple tight ends against Miami because they didn't want to attack Miami's defense that way. His quote was, we have a lot of confidence in the tight ends room, and those guys are getting better. Do you think that's coach speak or confidence?
I think it's more confidence or more truth. I think there's some coach speak in there when he's talking about the confidence in the guys beyond Eli Reardon. I think he believes Ty Washington's going to help them, and I think Mike Denbrock thinks that too. And I had asked him about James Flanagan at one point because I was surprised he wasn't maybe more involved going into the Miami game. I think they're really high on what he might be able to do later in the season. Eventually, they're going to get Cooper Flanagan back, they think, this season from his Achilles injury in January. I do really think using one tight end was a big part of this game plan that Notre Dame thought, and maybe miscalculated, that a better way to attack them was having more receivers and more running backs on the field than tight ends.
Yeah, I agree with that part of it. I don't think that necessarily needed to be like when they're on the goal line, like, because I think that backfired. Like they had Malachi Fields playing a de facto tight end, or Micah Gilbert playing a de facto tight end, like lined up, attached to the offensive line. And I think that hurt Notre Dame in terms of what it could do trying to run the ball on the goal line. Certainly it worked in Notre Dame's favor. One of those situations was the touchdown pass to Jordan Faison. Like they had everything in tight, and he sort of ran wide open because they didn't have someone that could keep up with him. But I think it's mostly coach speak. I think for whatever reasons, the reasons probably aren't necessarily the same for each of those reserve tight ends. They just didn't have enough faith in those guys to play in the Miami game to some extent. Because otherwise I think there would have been a jumbo package that they could have used near the goal line or in short yardage situations that would have better suited Notre Dame's personnel.
Yeah, when you look at the tight ends, when you look at how they could be deployed further down this, I don't see Ty Washington being a guy that you're a big goal line guy. You could use him there because he's got some versatility to his game, but I see him more as a strategic piece, kind of split him out or put him in motion or put him in the slot kind of thing. I think the guy that is the best hope for them to be a really good blocker, I think, until Cooper Flanagan comes back as the other Flanagan, James Flanagan, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there are some things that they could probably do with Washington as like more of an H-back and use him as a blocker. I mean, maybe thinking of like how Tommy Tremble was used at times.
Yeah.
I don't know that Washington has a lot to prove to be able to block as physically as Tommy Tremble did at times. Like that was something he was very good at. But I think there might be a way to use that and utilize that, whether it's in goal line situations or not. All right, last one on the coach speaker confidence. Notre Dame's official depth chart, in Freeman's words, didn't indicate any major personnel change-ups coming out of the Miami game. He said, at the end of the day, I'm as confident on personnel as I've ever been. Do you think that was coach speak or confidence?
I think it was confidence on the personnel. I think that depth chart that they give us on Mondays is going to be less and less accurate over the season. Where I think we might see some differences, Tyler, and everybody that's playing along, I love that you guys are playing along on this, is I think maybe some of the rotations will be a little bit different. For example, maybe you'll see more Kingston Viliamu-Asa, right, even though he might not be a starter. Maybe he ends up with the second most reps or comparable reps to Drake Bowen. You may see the safety rotation look a little bit different, although Jalen Stroman will be hard to get off the field after being one of the stronger safeties. But I think Tay Johnson, they feel really good about the way that he showed up in the game, and they may rotate the cornerbacks a little bit more in this game. Leonard Moore ended up playing every snap. So I could see there being positions where the rotation looks a little bit different, which the depth chart doesn't express. They don't like put somebody in bold type if they think they're going to play more.
Yeah, I think the confidence is genuine. That I don't think that necessarily means that there won't be some changes. Like maybe not starting lineup changes, or at least like if there are, there would be like positions that are going to rotate anyways. But I do think there will be some different ways to use guys and some changes that will be made based off of the performance in the first game.
I don't think I played that game well. I think I was in between coach speak and confidence a lot. I think I have to be more decisive, don't I? If I'm playing the game correctly.
Well, there's no prizes. There's no prizes and no punishments, so you could be as wishy-washy as you want. No one threw any virtual tomatoes at you, at least that I saw.
I like Scott Fagan's suggestion, maybe Will Black. I do think we could see at some point maybe a jumbo tight end package with an offensive tackle. I thought, Scott, that's a good suggestion. Hopefully Mike Denbrock is watching.
We'll send him. I'm sure he would love to hear from us because he's going to miss not talking to us on Tuesday night. Jimmy Page says, question, will Marcus be more involved in the defensive play calling this week? I didn't like us being so passive. Thanks.
I don't think so. I don't think he's going to do a Bob Davie. And if you guys, I mean, some of you may not be old enough to remember this, but Bob Davie at the end of his tenure took it over from a really good defensive coordinator, Greg Madison. And you very demonstratively saw him on the sideline, making sure everybody in the stadium knew he was doing the calls. I think Marcus will have input, I think, into big decisions, and I think he'll have a lot of input in the meeting room, but I think he trusts Chris Ash. I think he feels like that's a good hire and that he's going to trust his judgment. But again, there's a lot of great discussion that they had during the bye week, and I think during this week leading up to the game. And it's not just Marcus. I think Mike Mickens and the other assistants have voices too that should be listened to. Yeah,
I think Marcus Freeman's involvement in the defense is more. I mean, there might be situations where maybe things are going poorly and he's like, hey, we gotta do something different, or like, but I don't think he's necessarily saying, hey, this is the specific call that we're doing here. I'm not sure that that's the level that he's getting into on the sidelines with defensive play calls. Certainly he has opinions. I don't think he wasn't surprised by the play. I don't think he was surprised by the play calling against Miami, even though maybe we didn't necessarily know that was going to. I think like this was done in concert with Marcus Freeman's knowledge. Like it's not like Chris Ash just said, "Hey, this is what we're doing on game day." It was something that's been obviously discussed and maybe just didn't work out in the same ways that the people hoped it would. Another Marcus Freeman question. Does Marcus Freeman call a special play for special teams this week, especially if the offense struggles? Thank you, Scott, for another good question.
I don't know that he does it to spark the offense. I think he's more looking, Scott, for vulnerabilities in the other team's special teams. And if he's trying to match that up with a situation in the game where it would really spark Notre Dame and give them a lot of momentum and so forth. So I don't know it's necessarily you're struggling on offense. Okay, let's have James Rendell throw a pass. I think it's, oh my gosh, look at how they're loaded up on this one side. There's some vulnerability there to a fake. I think we can they can't put Jack Kaiser in there anymore, but use Jordan Faison or use somebody, Tyler Buckner, to do something on a fake punt or a fake field goal. I could see that happening.
Yeah, they don't ask James Rendell to throw it. They just put Tyler Buckner in a 16 jersey and have him throw it, and I hope no one notices it.
Well, Anthony Rizak already has a 16 jersey, and he's a quarterback.
Yeah.
So
there you go. Yeah, put Rizak. Maybe there's some madness there that you just discovered and gave away. So if it happens and they sniff it out, we can all blame Eric for no one being surprised.
I'll tell you what, if Mike Elko watches Football Never Sleeps, I want a testimonial. And he needs to sign up for the $1 special for
we need to I think when as it relates to like trying to help the offense, I think yes, it can help the offense. I think it can become too predictable if you like say, well, this is their third series in a row that we're punting, and this is a situation we can go for it. Like I think sometimes they might be able to catch on, like, hey, let's be careful here. They're really struggling on offense. Maybe it's time they're going to do something. So I think Notre Dame has done a good job of being, or at least last year, not this year, certainly, because that hasn't happened yet. But I think Notre Dame's done a good job of like using the element of surprise in that way too. Like sometimes it happens when they're struggling offensively. Sometimes it's right from the out of the gate. They're like, okay, let's just do this. And we feel good about this matchup or thing we're seeing with the other special teams, that we can take advantage of. Jeff Stevens says, what is the team vibe based on what you hear? Has the group closed ranks and kind of a no comment?
I think we'll get a little bit more of that tomorrow night. I mean, we interview players tomorrow. So usually Tuesday nights, and we're in the building and so forth. So you get a little bit more of a vibe of it. I'm not getting like there's dissension and they're worried or anything like that. But I always like to gauge that on Tuesday nights when we have a chance to talk to the players.
Yeah. And people might not know, like we had no access to the team last week. There was no interviews or we don't get any practice access during the season until the postseason. So we weren't around the team last week in any way. So tomorrow will be the first time that we'll have been around them in a press conference setting.
And one thing too is for those that like to follow this and that are used to it, and Tyler referenced this a little bit earlier in the show, is that typically we've always had the coordinators on Tuesdays for the past few years. That's not going to happen this year. And it's not Notre Dame's fault necessarily. There were people on our beat that asked that there be more of a rotation. So we get Mike Mickens tomorrow, and I enjoyed talking to Mike, but I'm not sure that it's the most helpful thing in terms of us telling our story. I think we're really going to regret not having those coordinators on a weekly basis and having them more as a 2 to 3 times a year thing. I think that was a mistake.
Yeah. I wonder if we can fire up a caucus to demand a revote or a reconsideration of the change
I
in
didn't get a
policy.
vote in that, so
No, I know.
I didn't even
It's
know. I was surprised.
surprising. And I mean, if it was like, maybe if they put Joe Rudolph out there tomorrow, I'd be like, okay, I get that. Like, we want to talk to Joe Rudolph. Mike Mickens, I mean, I don't know that we want that. His are the answers that we're looking for tomorrow, especially coming off of that first game. So I think the decision to make that push for that was a risk that I don't know that it is working out in our favor right now, in our being the greater media. All right, we talked a little bit about confidence. I wanted to riff a little bit off of a column I wrote today about 5 players who I'm the most confident will rebound from poor performances against Miami. The caveat that I had was that they had to receive below a 60 grade from PFF, which indicates that they had a below average performance. And I also excluded some players who I thought maybe played better than their grades indicated that were below 60. Those included Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Jadarian Price, Malachi Fields. That I'm not excluding those from your list. Like, if you want to use them, you certainly can, but those, I didn't include those. I'll get into my list first if you want some more time to think about it, or if you have some ideas off the bat here, Eric.
Well, I do, but why don't you go first? And now, which ones? I want to play the game right. So, who am I not allowed to talk about?
Well, I didn't include Leonard Moore.
Okay, who I would have been on my list.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah. I think these would have been. They were easy picks. I thought that's
okay.
why.
So you want those more subtle picks? Okay. So Leonard Moore's off the list. Who else?
Christian Gray's off the list.
Okay.
And then Jadarian Price, I felt like he was dinged for having the one fumble. Otherwise,
okay.
I don't think he played poor. And then Malachi Fields too. Like, he obviously had the fumble. Otherwise, I don't know that he necessarily played poor.
But everybody else is good.
Everyone else that I listed for you there is on the board for you.
Okay, you go ahead and go first, and I'll come up.
You want to go 1-1, or should I just tell you all 5 of mine?
Let's go 1-1. That's fine.
All right. The first one I had, who I'm most confident in recovering, is Adon Schuler. I was surprised by his performance. I think he can play better. He did have issues with tackles last season. He led the team in missed tackles a year ago. But I think he won't have a continued issue with it in the way that he did against Miami. And also the situation that obviously everyone remembers the most from that game is him sort of playing passively with a ball that CJ Daniels was able to catch in front of him when it looked like Adon Schuler was thinking he was going to intercept by waiting on it. And even Marcus Freeman mentioned a situation like that without saying Schuler's name specifically, and I think everyone knew what he was talking about. All right, who would be your first pick?
I'll go with my first draft choice. I will go Drake Bowen. I think he's going to recover, and I think he's going to get the schematic tweaks down, and we're going to see lots of tackles and no missed tackles.
Yeah, Bowen was my second pick. I do think we'll see improved play there. I understand people. I think Tom Frawley was maybe the most vocal in our comments tonight, pining for Kingston Viliamu-Asa. I agree with you. I think Kingston Viliamu-Asa needs to play a lot. I think he can be alongside Drake Bowen too. It doesn't have to be in rotation with Drake Bowen. So I am pro KVA, but I also am pro Bowen as well.
Okay, so my number 2 is Emil Wagner. I think he's just too good to have a sub 60 grade again ever, and especially against this Texas A&M front again. I realize when you look at their defensive numbers, the 2 things that they were able to do against Utah State were sacks and tackles for loss. But I think in terms of run blocking and being above average pass blocker, but a really good run blocker, I think a lot of Notre Dame's offensive linemen, but I'll start with Emil Wagner. That'll be my symbolic pick from the line.
And Wagner was my third choice. Wagner was my third choice. Like, that was what I said. Like, he's played too much good football in his career to sort of that be what he is all of a sudden. Like, I think he was just abused by Ruben Bain at times, and even Akeem Mesidor. I think Miami's defensive ends got the better of him. I don't think that will be what we see from Emil Wagner moving forward consistently. I think he will learn from his mistakes and get things straightened out and be a better anchor for Notre Dame's offensive line moving forward.
Okay, for me, number 3 is Jordan Greathouse, Jaden Greathouse. I changed his name to Jordan.
You want him to be more like Jordan Faison because he needs to take inspiration from
to
him?
help improve. That's his evil twin. I think it'll be Jaden Greathouse. He just looked lost in that game, and it's so unusual. I think we all expected a big burst from him after the way he finished last season, but I know how hard he works, how determined he is, how good he is, and I think he'll find his groove against this Texas A&M defense. Again, they're 71st in the country in pass efficiency defense after playing UTSA and Utah State, and I think there's an opportunity there for Jaden.
Yeah, I do think Jaden will improve. I didn't include him on my list. Not that I don't think he will improve. I just think like maybe this is just Jaden Greathouse's MO. Like he disappears at times, which I think happened at times through last season. Obviously had a great finish to the season, but maybe that is something that he still needs to get over and find a better way to impact a game on certain days. I know Marcus Freeman spent a lot of time last year saying, hey, you could play a great game as a receiver and not catch a single pass. I'm not sure that necessarily would be the way that I would describe Jaden Greathouse's play against Miami. My 4th pick was Gerby Lambert. We mentioned earlier that we both thought he would start. I just think he was on the board. I guess he was something I considered, well, should I exclude him? Because I don't think he played that poorly. I think he had a couple of really bad mistakes, one in pass pro and one in run blocking. The run blocking that was pretty magnified in terms of, I think it was a 3rd and short run by CJ Carr that got blown up because he didn't seem to block the right guy. But I just think that he's going to continue to improve. I have confidence in him. I think there's a lot of value to what he can add to Notre Dame's offensive line. So I put Gerby Lambert on my list, which I felt was a little bit maybe reaching out a little bit because he is the least experienced of these guys that I've included on my list so far.
Super talented. I mean, that's a bold pick. I give you credit. I maybe have a safer pick on my number 4, which is Will Pauling. I think as Notre Dame starts to throw the ball downfield more, I think Will Pauling fits into that, and I think we're going to see why they thought he could be special in plucking him out of the transfer portal from Wisconsin.
And Pauling was my 5th pick, so we have a lot of similarities in our 2 lists. But I just, for whatever reason, he didn't seem to be a big part of the screen game heavy passing attack. I think there are ways that Notre Dame needs to get him involved. I think he can be a key member of this passing game. And as we see CJ Carr continue to evolve and the coaching staff show more trust in him, I think Will Pauling will be a benefactor of that.
My number 5 is my daring pick, and it's Jason Onye. Marcus Freeman had said in August, Jason Onye had played as well as any interior defensive lineman since he had been there. And there's at least one All-American in that group and Riley Mills and some really good players. I think that guy's going to show up. The thing is, Texas A&M's interior offensive line is really, really good. So I am really going out on a limb on that one. But for everything that Jason Onye's been through, I think he's a really strong individual, and he's going to come to play on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think that would be a great benefit to Notre Dame if he sort of better matches the expectations that Marcus Freeman put on him with that high praise coming out of the preseason. All right. I don't see any questions that have come up recently, but if you have questions, please chime in. And if I missed it, say something as well. We'll get on to a little bit of A&M discussion. The Aggies are 2-0 after wins over UTSA and Utah State the last 2 weeks. What are A&M's biggest strengths going into Saturday, Eric?
For me, the quarterback play has been really good, and people might have heard Marcel Reed got hurt in the Utah State game on Saturday. He came out of the game in the 3rd quarter. He did not return. Mike Elko said after the game, Coach Mike Elko, that he'd be fine for the Notre Dame game. People I talked to down that cover the beat, Texas A&M beat, and even the ones that like Papa John's Pizza, they said Marcel Reed would be good to go. Mike Elko reiterated that again today. So I feel like he's going to play, and he's played well, and I'm impressed with him, and I think he brings a lot of problems. I think A&M offensive line, speed at wide receiver with those two transfers that I mentioned earlier, Craver and Concepcion, and offensive line, experience. So lots of good stuff on offense.
Yeah, the offensive line is basically the same starting offensive line that played against Notre Dame last season. So that speaks to sort of the experience that group has. Reed, the passing numbers for A&M's offense were better than I would have anticipated, even against lower competition. They're 21st in the FBS with 305 passing yards per game and 28th in passing efficiency. They've been good in the red zone. They've scored every time they've made it to the red zone. Talked a little bit about Cassius Howell as an edge rusher earlier. I think they have decent linebackers, although they maybe haven't been able to do their best in
really good
stopping the run. Yeah, Torian York is a guy that's an All-America level player as well. How about their weaknesses?
A lot of them are on defense. You look at, pretty much across the board on defense. They're 80th in scoring defense, 82nd in rush defense, 71 pass efficiency defense. The only really good numbers on defense are sacks and tackles for loss. They're not very good on third down. Turnover margin isn't a super impressive number either. So I think, and then when you look at offense, you mentioned this earlier, third down efficiency for Texas A&M with the two teams they played. Maybe they only have like 3 third downs for the year. They were making first downs on second down and first down. But they're 101st. That jumped out at me. And I think their rushing offense is just down a little bit because they haven't used a lot of moss yet.
Yeah, I'm gonna look that up while you're talking, because I did say, I was like, well, that is divisible by 3 numbers, so maybe they haven't had a lot of third downs, but I'll look that up. Let's transition in. This aligns with the question Scott just put in here. What do you think will be the most important matchups against Notre Dame for Texas A&M, and vice versa, in terms of what Notre Dame needs to do, and that may determine the outcome?
I think Marcus Freeman talks about being an offensive line, defensive line driven program. Those need to show up in this game. They showed up well enough on offense last year, given how inexperienced they were. And Notre Dame's defensive front was really good against A&M last year. And CJ Carr needs to take another step with his game, I think, and Mike Denbrock with his play calling. We need to see, okay, what is this offense going to look like as we march toward October, because it is going to look different. And I think this would be a good game to see some of that, because again, yes, Texas A&M has rushed the passer, but you've been able to pick them apart in the secondary too when they haven't gotten to the passer.
Yeah, well, for the record, Texas A&M is 8 of 24 on third down, so it's not just 1 of 3. So that is how their 33% has come to be on third downs. I do think, like, as cliche as it is, I think the running game on both sides of the ball will be big in terms of the outcome of this game. I think, especially if you can limit Texas A&M's running game, I think maybe you make their offense a little bit more predictable. I'm not sure that Marcel Reed can just sort of sit back there and pick apart Notre Dame's defense in the passing game, even though it has been improved to start the season. So keeping Reed in check will certainly be a key part to that, both as a thrower and as a runner. But I think Notre Dame really needs to be able to run the ball against this A&M defense and take advantage of that. I think mismatch maybe a little strong, but I think there might be some truth to that too. All right, let's wrap up with some recruiting talk, Eric.
Okay, well, in the meeting we had this morning at blueandgold.com, I was told in the meeting that this is the biggest recruiting weekend Notre Dame has had in a million years or something close to that. And I thought, how could
Well, you
that
would
be?
know since you covered Rockney.
Yeah. But a lot of 2027 kids coming this weekend. They can't sign for 15 months, but there's a lot of talent coming. So Tyler, why don't you give us what the recruiting buzz is all about?
Yeah, and credit to Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly for doing all the reporting on this during football season. I'm not as plugged in with the recruiting with those guys taking the lead on it. But there are a lot of big names expected to be in town. 5 of the top 30 in the Rivals industry rankings for the 2027 class are on the expected visitors list. That includes cornerback Joshua Dobson, offensive tackle Mark Matthews, edge defender David Jacobs, wide receiver Manchin Sales, and safety Honor Faleve Johnson. And there's 13 more 4-star visitors in the 2027 class. It's going to be a bit of a who's who in the 2027 class, and I think it'll start to shape Notre Dame's board in the 2027 class in terms of who's genuinely interested in the Irish moving forward. A big opportunity to get guys that can travel in time to make visits because of the night game. So I think a good opportunity here for Notre Dame, who's basically wrapped up the 2026 class to really start building some momentum in this 2027 class. And Notre Dame is really pouring a lot of resources into making sure that they can get as many of these guys on campus as they can.
Well, I'll tell you what, wake me up when 2028 defensive tackle Bone Crusher, Caleb Bone Crusher, comes to town. Is his last name Tucker?
Tucker, yes.
Yeah.
It's
Crusher.
Crusher.
Bone Crusher. What I call him?
No. I was just joking that Bone and Crusher is his first and last name. You said it right.
and the best part about that was I had an interview with him on one of our podcasts, and I said, "Have you actually crushed any bones?" And he goes, "Yes, sir, I have."
Well, all right. That is going to be it for us tonight on Football Never Sleeps. We appreciate everyone joining us. If you missed us, go ahead and start it over, and hopefully you enjoy the discussion. I think we hit on a lot of topics based off of the press conference today, and a little bit of A&M look ahead. So we appreciate you tuning in. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video. Comment after the show what you thought, and check out our deal at blueandgold.com. New subscribers can sign up for the first year of an annual subscription for $52, so $1 a week. That's over half off the regular price. So we have such great content, such great teammates over at blueandgold.com. I hope you take advantage of that if you haven't already. All right, have a good night.